SABC, host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.
Welcome back, everybody. Right, still here holding down the fort at SABC News at the Media Centre. And we have been saying that the G20 leaders and the delegations, invited guests, should all be arriving here. Perhaps some are arriving, but we haven't gotten word as yet. But the moment we do, we'll certainly turn our attention to that. But we've still got guests in the studio with us, and joining us, as we promised, is Sophie Mokoena, who's going to be with us also to check out the leaders that are arriving, and also to just weigh in more on this conversation that we've been having. And I'm going to pick up with you, because we did say before the break about the whole illicit outflows from the continent. In terms of we gave the example of the cigarettes, but the bigger issue right now is where we are finding these vital minerals, which we've got, which is going to basically feed into AI technology and everything that's under discussion right now. How do we as a continent protect ourselves and the illicit outflows that happen with everything before? How do we stop it?
So there's this idea of critical minerals, which are these minerals and metals that are really important for the global economy and for development in different ways, particularly in the digitization that's currently underway, and all of these new technologies that are emerging. And that's everything from cobalt to chromium to there's a whole lithium, there's a whole range of minerals, many of which are found in the African continent. And the big question is, do we maintain the kind of exploitative, extractive relationship that the African continent has had with the world around the extraction of these minerals, to be beneficiated, to have value added to them outside of the continent and then sold back to us as ready-made and finished products? Or do we take part in the value chain of these technologies in a different way in the 21st century? But also, are we properly recompensated for that mineral wealth when it goes out? And that's then the issues of taxation. Is the trade properly taxed and managed and regulated? And we saw with this G20, the G20 Critical Minerals Framework, that's meant to provide an infrastructure and a regulatory infrastructure for the regulation of the trade in the critical mineral resources, and basically a blueprint for how to do that in a way that is equitable and that doesn't reinforce the kind of economic injustice that we've seen over the last 4 centuries in terms of trade with the African continent in natural resources.
And Sophie, in that regard, I think I don't know if it is, but I just get a sense that maybe there's a bit of a downplaying in terms of how critical, but also how potentially difficult that discussion might be, given that you have, on the one hand, a group of economies who have generally benefited from that sort of exploitation, if you will, of African minerals, and now the owners of those minerals saying, hey, hold up. We don't like the rules of that game anymore, so we want to change them.
It is going to be a difficult conversation, because your industrialized nations, particularly members of the G7, benefited during the first industrial revolution. They took our minerals. We were left with nothing. Now, this time around, we are saying as the continent, during this fourth industrial revolution that the doctor spoke about, and also classifying those minerals, hey, you have to beneficiate. We want the products to leave our shores fully fleshed product, because then it is a better value chain. Now you take our minerals, you bring them back. If I have to buy these commodities, these products now, they are even so expensive, I can't afford them. And you are who you are in terms of glitz and glamour and glitter because of our minerals. They help you to develop. So this time around, we want to use these minerals to develop. Now, Illicit is there also. It's not only in terms of the currencies. It is when you package, you'll find that it is cobalt, and I say it's papers, the labeling. So when you charge at the exchange control, they are going to use the figures looking at paper, export of paper, not of cobalt, and therefore you cheat. That's what the high-level panel report, the Africa high-level panel report, pointed out to. That high-level panel report was compiled under the auspice of the AU, chaired by the former South African President Thabo Mbeki. It was presented to the United Nations. The UN supported that you cannot continue to do this illicit trade and also financial outflows. It was also presented before the European Union. They know they have it. They support, they agree. They must implement. They must never allow their companies to cheat and to allow illicit. So these countries within the G20, they must work together to stamp out illicit financial outflows, whether in a currency form, in terms of money exchange, or in terms of products that are being exported to. So you see, as a continent, we have a document that speaks to that. So here, Africa must say to the member states, African Union, guys, implement the recommendation or what's contained in that Africa high-level panel report. They can even invite Mbeki to come and present.
Let me ask this before you answer. Factor this into your response. Do we have the leadership on the African continent who would be able to have those type of conversations and stand firm on it so that we can make it a reality? Because let's be clear, the reason we are here right now is because our leaders of the past have brought us to this point where they haven't been able to stand their ground on matters such as this.
Well, look, I think that there's certainly a leadership problem, there's a political will problem. I think there's also the issue on the African continent that we struggle very much to work collaboratively and cooperatively with each other because the individual interests, the national interests of individual states, of individual governments,
and individual presidents
tends to overtake any attempts at working collaboratively, because the reality is, and I will say this, not quite in defense, but to say that, being able to work together requires ceding your sovereignty, some of your sovereignty to the collective in order to be able to make collective decisions. And we see with the EU, for example, that EU member states cede some of they give up some of their sovereignty to be able to then work collectively through the EU. And that's immensely difficult to do. And so to do that in Africa, you also need to have some guarantees from the AU around the efficiency of those institutional systems of the AU in order to make it worth countries' while. I do just want to say that I'd mentioned this G20 Critical Minerals Framework, and part of the difficulty, of course, is that framework is voluntary and non-binding. So it is in some ways a wish list of things that we would want to do and to work towards. But it is up to individual member states to actually abide by what is in it. And I think that this is where it becomes critical for the individual countries and member states that have got critical minerals within them to really advocate more effectively and together in order to balance out the terms of trade with the rest of the world.
Two things. Number one, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Because a little birdie just told me it's your birthday. No, not that birdie, another birdie. So I have to stop. That's how I'm segueing away from this conversation into the next. But we're seriously happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
We're sending you lots of love. Lots of
Good
love.
to be here.
Then the next one I want to talk about is we need to talk about something that's happening at 9 o'clock, and that, of course, is IBSA. And for those that don't know about IBSA, this is it's basically India, Brazil, and South Africa formation. It was even before BRICS that this formation had been around. I mean, it's been around since I think about the beginning of the 2000s.
Yes,
it's a very important. It's important, and this is in fact some visuals that we've got from inside of this IBSA meeting that's going to be taking place, the summit. So what's been so effective is that if you look at what the G20 has really had the ability to do, I mean, we've had India that hosted it, then Brazil, and then South Africa. So the three countries for the 3 consecutive years have been the hosts of the G20, and now they're coming together to discuss this. So perhaps, Sophie, let me speak to you about this. What are we, this is a very important organization. It's important for us as well. Talk to us about it.
I think at this juncture, perhaps for people who are not familiar with IBSA, IBSA was launched at the time President Lula was the president of Brazil. So in the House, a person who will have institutional memory will be President Lula. Mbeki was there also. And India, it was, I've forgotten who was the prime minister at that time, the one who passed on, the former prime minister. So the intention was to strengthen the South-South cooperation. And then they came up with IBSA. That is why I often say, yes, BRICS, but there was IBSA before BRICS. China and Russia were not there. It was the developing South trying to strengthen themselves. So it's continuing. It doesn't get coverage. I don't know why, but it's quite an important grouping or formation. Because when you look at the current challenge with the United States of America, the 3 IBSA members are dealing with a hostile trade relations with the United States of America. The hefty tariffs that were imposed on Brazil, China, and South Africa. So I think on the agenda, there is no way they are not going to look at trade rules that are being violated at this point in time, but also just to strengthen the political relations, because there are so many global challenges where you always have to have a common position as friends, as a forum, to ensure that when you are at a multilateral stage like the United Nations, you speak in one voice. So the other issue will be climate change. We know the President of the United States of America doesn't believe in that. But the 3 countries are really committed to addressing challenges of climate change and pushing for financing. You also have the other problem of peace and security.
Yes.
The 3 countries will have to come up with one voice in terms of what's happening in Ukraine, in the Middle East, also on the continent, Sudan and DRC, to mention the few. So it will be trade and relations, but also political relations. And therefore, when President Cyril Ramaphosa, Prime Minister Modi, and President Lula of Brazil meet today, I expect that they will emphasize those issues, and they are going to speak in one voice. There's not, I don't expect a dissent. This is a formidable relationship.
Yeah, and certainly the issue of equality or inequality being discussed as well. Just to answer your question, it was Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was the Prime Minister at the time, when for India.
Need to take a break. We're coming back right after this.
SABC, host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.